I'm, so happy to be here. I am smiling because I could not imagine a better group of people to spend today with. Um, Last year to this day, I was fired from Google. And I remember I was at this event last year, and I think we had a fireside chat or something like that. And I don't remember if it was right after I got fired or right before I got fired. But I always feel at home being being here with this group of people. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to do that. So before I talk about my institute, I wanted to talk about my thoughts in terms of holding large technology companies accountable. And then I'll talk a little bit about my institute and what I hope to accomplish. So I had made this appearance at the EU Parliament the day before yesterday, I believe, and it was on this committee of AI bias. But I talked more about worker power and how to hold corporations accountable and how to increase worker power so that we have checks and balances, because we're in a situation where a few billionaires are running every aspect of the agenda for AI research development. So I think that they might have expected me to talk more about transparency or documentation or responsible AI or whatever, but like the first thing on my mind was that. So I want to talk to you about why. When I reflect on the way I got fired, I found out that I had apparently resigned from my direct report, who was so distraught when she was telling me. And the way Google tried to smear my reputation and my work, why were they not able to do that? Why did they not succeed in doing that? It was because of the worker organizing that had been building up to that point, right? So Claire and Meredith, who led the Google walkout, who were similarly pushed out, members of the Fired Five, and the Alphabet Workers Union. So all of this stuff had been brewing, right? And then the ethical AI team really galvanized and organized. They put themselves at risk. A lot of people inside and outside of Google really came to my defense and organized on my behalf, because what they did to me was just a symptom of what they've been doing to so many people and have been continuing to do to so many people. And because of that worker organizing is why my firing made headlines, et cetera, et cetera. But then there's all of these other people who are not so visible and don't have safety nets, the safety nets that I had, which gave me the space to work on some of the things I'm working on right now. So if we are talking about the harms of AI or anything like that, the fundamental thing for me is to increase worker power, have safety nets such that people are not so afraid to lose their jobs, because they lose everything. Your visa status is tied to your job. Your healthcare is tied to your job. So we can't talk about the harms of AI as kind of distinct from this. And so again, like the regulations and other things about AI are very important, but the number one thing that would safeguard us is curbing the power of the companies that develop this technology and increasing the power of the people who speak up against it. And so obviously, and I'm so happy to see that Ifeoma's going to speak here later on today, but if you look at the work she's done on both of these aspects. So I remember last year, right around when I was about to be fired, I was asking about whistleblower protection. And I talked to Ifeoma for like an hour or something on the phone, and she told me about the tech worker handbook that she was working on. This is a year ago, and now you've seen the result of her hard work. And let me tell you that I direct everybody who talks to me about whistleblowing or what their next steps are to first read the entirety of the tech worker handbook. And then in addition to that, she worked so hard on the Silenced No More Act that has now been passed in California. And this is huge, right? Because it makes it illegal to silence workers from speaking out about racism, harassment, and other forms of abuse. And we all need to advocate for this law to be universal. It has to, we need to, it has to be passed in every state. And even, you know, internationally, these are the kinds of things I think we need to advocate for. So when I have been working on this independent research institute, I noticed a few things. So, you know, so I'm trying to work on this institute for a number of reasons. One of them, chief among them, being that the incentive structures in industry are and academia, that elite academic institutions that are so intertwined with these tech companies, don't, in my view, allow for the kind of work I want to do. We want to have long-term research. We want to not publish papers every 3 months or whatever. We want healthy, thriving people. I don't know if you saw some of these tweets that people at OpenAI have about working 96 hours or something like that. That's just not, I don't think that's how people should live, you know? Or at least they shouldn't be pressured to do that. And I don't even know how that's possible. But these, you know, the culture in the research world and AI specific, especially, kind of just forces people or is pushing people to those things. And so I want to build, you know, something that is an alternative, incentive structures that we can set, that we can abide by. And while doing this, I noticed, so we're a research institute, we have to raise money, right, to get the ground going. And one of the things I'm really worried about right now is, or thinking about, is sustaining this research institute beyond, you know, 2-year grants from foundations, etc. So how do we generate our own revenue? How do we diversify so that we're not beholden, so that, you know, we don't go from being beholden to big tech corporations to being beholden to a different entity. And so while working on this, I realized, you know, there are a number of things people have written about the nonprofit sector, big philanthropy, they call it. And you see that the same billionaires who are running these multinational tech companies with unchecked power also advise governments on the AI research agenda. Like, for example, Eric Schmidt is an example. He was a chairman and CEO at Google for a long time. Then he went and founded the National Commission on AI or something like that, which was advising the government. And he had Schmidt Futures. He has Schmidt Futures. It's a fund that says that they want to, you know, empower people to work on the hardest problems, etc. So now you have these same people, and Bill and Melinda Gates, you know, Zuckerberg and Priscilla Chan and Jeff Bezos and all these people who first, you know, they control the world through these multinational tech companies and government agenda and the nonprofit agenda. So now imagine if I speak up. I'm not just, so at Google, if I speak up and antagonize someone, there are laws that attempt to protect me, right? They're not sufficient. We want to strengthen them. But in the nonprofit or in the fundraising world, that does not exist, right? So they can just sort of make sure to squash us if I antagonize someone. So this is the kind of issue I'm thinking about. So what's the way forward, right? I really believe, because we are always in this cycle where somebody over there is invested on, gets $1 billion, growth at any cost, harmful technology, and we're constantly behind trying to stop that technology, or trying to analyze the harms or trying to stop the harms. And then once we are so exhausted trying to do that, we're not in the next, you know, phase, right? We're not implementing our vision of the future. And so by the time we kind of maybe succeed in somewhat curbing this power, they're off to the next thing. So in order to, I think, be more proactive, about this, and so that we don't fall behind constantly, we need more investment and support for these kinds of institutions. So mine is just one, right? There is Algorithmic Justice League, there is AI Now, there is Data and Society, and I would love to see much more of these. But I would want to be more accountable to the public rather than, you know, a billionaire or something like that. So I would love to see more publicly funded, more public funding for these kinds of things that does not come from the military, because I don't want our options to be, okay, can we be incentivized to figure out how to kill more people more efficiently, or how to make the most, you know, amount of money for a particular corporation. So I think in order to change the incentive structure, we should, you know, and to increase the amount of power that workers have. I think this is one of the things we can do, in addition to all the regulation that we're advocating for, and in addition to things that like Silence No More Act that we should all advocate for. With that, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about my institute, our institute, and what we're doing. So I'm going to share my screen. And 1 second, I'm gonna present okay, so so we're calling it the Distributed AI Research Institute, so the DARE for short. And you know, I like how DARE is, I don't know what the word is, kind of like dare, DARE, right? We're daring to exist in this environment. And the Distributed AI Research Institute is distributed. So as in, nobody has to come, you know, leave their community or their home or their environment to work at this institute. And I thought that was actually, when I was thinking about the most important characteristic of an institute that I wanted to build, one of them was this distributed nature. And I saw it in the ethical AI team. We had a very distributed team across like multiple continents, because the technology affects the whole world, but the whole world is not getting a chance to affect technology right now, right? And so, and if you want community rooted research, and you're, you know, need to displace people from their communities, they have to all go to Silicon Valley or something like that. That's not the kind of thing I want to contribute to. And so this is there. Our logo and our color scheme, I mean, we're still working on some stuff, was designed by Diana. I'll send you a link. I love her designs. And so these are some of our values, right? At the root of DARE, I think what's going to end up happening is that we're going to move a lot more slowly. We're going to put out a lot less work, a lot less artifacts, let's say. And it's going to take us more resources to do each one. Why is that? Because if you don't want to exploit people and you want to compensate all of the different people involved in the research process who you extract knowledge from, that means you're going to spend more money for each thing that you produce. Again, if you don't want to drive people to work, you know, unhealthy and incomprehensible hours, that's also what's going to happen. So and then if you want to do ambitious research or think long term, you know, there's some works that come together very fast for some reason. That's fine, but you have to be willing to have a long-term view and not, you know, be willing to not put us stuff in years even. So I expect that our institute will, you know, do less, have less stuff out, and that each of those things will cost more, just by virtue of the fact that, you know, one of the goals is not to exploit people. And also, again, one of the goals is in addition to, you know, doing critical work where you know, critique technology that's been already built, which is stuff I've done myself. I'd also like to have an institute that also has a positive model of how we think AI research should be done, right? If we were to have AI research or technology like that, what is our idea of how that research should be done, and what are examples of those kinds of work, rather than constantly, you know, putting out something and having to analyze the harms or something like that after the fact. And who's involved? So let me tell you, right now we have one research fellow who is Rasa Jasafala, who she is in Johannesburg, and the advisory committee. So this is basically like a board. The advisory committee members are like a board because we're currently a fiscally sponsored project of Code for Science and Society. So I love Code for Science and Society. They are generally about open science and open source software, etc. So in Shira, he's a lecturer in Kenya, and Safia, I think that that many people are probably probably know about. And so for me, for example, Shira and Safia represent the things I would like to see from the Institute. So first of all, of course, interdisciplinary research I think is crucial. Again, distributed. So Shira is in East Africa, in Kenya, and Safia's in the States, both working to advance, you know, technology in a way that benefits people, marginalized groups, showing two ends of the spectrum. Safia does, you know, a critique of technology in a very important way, and Shira shows the positive kind of development of technology for me. So he works a lot on food security, on analysis of climate change, and many other projects. If you can check out some of his work. And so how we are supported currently is by grants from MacArthur Foundation, Ford Foundation, Open Society Foundations, and a gift from the Kapoor Center. And also, we also have a grant from Rockefeller. And like I said, the main thing I'm thinking about right now is how to sustain DARE and how to diversify our grants. And so one of the things we want to do in addition to research is also partner with organizations that we want to support. Let's say people have, you know, questions about data collection process, or questions about bias that they're seeing in their products or in their work or something like that. How can we work with them to consult with them or something like that? So we haven't figured that out 100% the plan yet, but that's one of the things we want to do. So why is this important? I think it's very important for us to, again, have to implement our version of how we want to create technology, because I think we'd have different results, right? I love this tweet by Karen saying that, you know, a lot of times people say, oh yeah, you know, if these companies end up, you know, solving this huge problem because of the models that they're creating, isn't that great? And she's saying, no, you shouldn't have our benevolent dictators, you know, determining what kinds of technologies we should have and for what reason. We need to have a more distributed approach, more groups of people participating and implementing their future, their notion of how things should be done and what should be built. So some of the examples I love of this kind of approach is, for instance, this example from the Maori trying to save their language from big tech, right? So so Hiku Media, I guess, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly. They gathered. So they wanted to have some language technology, right? I believe it's speech recognition or speech, some sort of speech tech, and they had a competition using local radio stations, recorded over 300 hours of annotated radio. So it was enough data to build a language tech. But then this company came and wanted to buy their data, I believe, and they said no, and they had published their rejection along with a video, right, and explaining why. And they literally say, you know, this is the final frontier for colonization. They said, you know, their language was suppressed and physically beat out of them by their grandparents, and now they want to sell our language back to us as a service. For me, this gives a few examples. One is, you know, how people would approach tech development, right? So sometimes you might not want to release the data. Sometimes you might not even want to write a paper. You might not even want, you know, people to know exactly what kind of research you did, because that might not be beneficial for the specific, you know, community you're working with. So I think having an independent research institute with our own incentive structures allows us to navigate those things. Maybe at some point we work on something and we decide, actually, this is not something we should work on anymore. And because we have our own incentive structure, we are, I think, able to do that. I'm going to skip this, but I wanted to give another example that I like. These are not projects we did, but projects that other people did. This one, actually, I was involved in a while ago, a couple of years ago. This is from Ernest Mubaze, who's at Makerere University in Uganda, and his collaborators. And what they did was work on cassava disease recognition using computer vision. Cassava is the second largest provider of carbohydrates. It's an important food security crop. Grown at least by 80% of smallholder farmer households in sub-Saharan Africa. And this is very important, you know, poor yields, locust swarms with climate change especially. And they worked with smallholder farmers. So this is a very important crop for smallholder farmers rather than the large industrial farms to gather data and kind of, so that the farmers, a lot of farmers have smartphones, but they don't have the expertise to gauge, you know, to surveil their land and gauge the disease progression. So they worked with them to have an app to help them to do these things. So these are the different classification disease and the health, the severity of the health, whatever. You try to do something like this in a, again, within existing incentive structures. You'll try to write a paper and they'll say, oh, nothing novel. Oh, data related work is, you know, it's not really a lot. It's not, you know, important or whatever. So, you know, and then it kind of doesn't encourage you or into working with various experts, working with local experts, working with the farmers, making sure you don't exploit anybody, etc. And then I want to talk about our last project. So this is actually something from DARE, although we had been working on it for years now. So it's, you know, I just started working on DARE in the last few months, so I can't say it's a DARE project, but it's something that we worked on together for a while and are also investing resources into it. So you'll see more follow-up work with that. And this is led by Rasa Jasafala, who's a DARE fellow, our first fellow. And it's, so I had to tell you how this work came out, and also with Nyalang Morosi Luzango and Richard Klein, all of them, I'm the only person not in South Africa in this project. So the way this work came about was that about a few years ago, I started calling my colleagues in the African continent, and I asked them, if you were to have no resource constraints, you know, students, whatever, like what kind of research would you do? And Nyalang said, I would analyze spatial apartheid using the legacy of spatial apartheid, using satellite imagery and computer vision techniques. So this is an example. I believe this is in Cape Town, and this is by Miller. So there's a bunch of aerial images. And when you see this, you can see that even though apartheid is officially, you know, over, the legacy is very clear, right? On the left, we have these huge houses, green, whatever. On the right, we have these really densely populated townships. And so under apartheid, people were forced by law to live in these various neighborhoods. And obviously the non-white people were the ones who had to live in the townships, but the government allocated a very low budget for them. And so this is another example here. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to see if we can create a data set that allows researchers and urban studies and other places that helps them analyze the legacy and evolution of spatial apartheid, especially if they want to work on policies and analyze, what's going on and how to reverse, how can we reverse the effects of spatial apartheid. Now, so these are kind of examples of the changes that we can see over time using satellite imagery. And the biggest issue here, and so here you can see like the changes, right, in new developments, 2011, 2013, 2015, 2017. We spent years working on this project, and the first thing we had to do is gather the data set. Gathering the data set takes years if you want to do it right, talking to various experts, etc. And we're going to release it, but even to release it, we're thinking about how to release it properly, how to create visualizations so that people can, interact with this work, etc. And so again, I think having a research institute like ours allows us to decide that we're going to spend all the time needed to communicate our work in ways that are helpful to people other than just, only writing research papers. So we, using our data set, we trained some models to determine, which kinds of neighborhoods exist. So here's an example. You have an image, our ground truth. So here the gray parts are saying that, this is a non-wealthy neighborhood. And then you can see, I believe I forgot exactly the class definition here. And then on 2017, so 2011 is the image we have, and 2017 is the changes that we've been able to detect. And we ask questions like, out of the vacant land, like what kind of changes happen? So for instance, here on this plot, you can see that, for instance, the gray part is background, which means vacant land. And if you see the first bar plot, it says most of the vacant land between 2011 and 2017 has been converted to wealthy neighborhoods, right? And then, most of the vacant land has stayed vacant, but out of the ones that haven't stayed vacant, it's been converted more to wealthy neighborhoods. Anyhow, you can see we're working on more analyses like this, partnering with other groups who've been studying spatial apartheid. And if you're more interested, we'll be presenting this work at Europe's, but we'll have also follow-up work. And with that, I hope I didn't take too much time. I'm not sure. And so I'm happy to take questions if we have time for questions.
Can I just say this was brilliant, Timnit? I don't know how you do all that you do. And I keep telling myself how grateful and blessed we all are that we are alive at a time of Timnit Gebru and Ifeoma Uzoma and Safia Nobles and so many incredible women doing so much great work. Super thrilled that all these organizations like Ford Foundation and MacArthur are stepping up to support you. This is so incredibly powerful, much needed critical work to save us from the benevolent. I take issue with the word benevolent, but definitely our billionaire overlords. We are also the Women in AI Ethics initiative. The program is not tech funded. We have not taken any tech money, very simply because what you said, we believe in it, that we do not want to be beholden to the tech agenda. So thank you so much. And we do have a few minutes if folks want to pop any questions, and I think we may have a
So I see one from Maori. Hi, by the way. You said the word distributed as opposed to decentralized. Honestly, I didn't think about this. I think decentralized is probably a similar concept, and so I would have probably chosen decentralized too. So I didn't really think about it. For some reason, the first word that came to my mind was distributed. And at first I was like, is this dumb? Like I told some of my friends, and but I was explaining the reason, and I just stayed with it. So decentralized is a similar concept. Well, the concept for me is that decentralized movements, I think in general, are more robust, right? Like, because you don't have to, it's not like you attack one person and the whole movement is gone or something like that. So in the same and similar vein, for instance, when I the last person I hired into the ethical AI team at 20% before I got fired, poor guy, Mahdi. His name is Al Mahdi, and he's a Moroccan living in Zurich. And he was a journalist, and then he did his PhD in computer science, and he works on theoretical computer science as well. But by necessity, he's been studying the misinformation, hate speech, and all the troll armies and all of the things that are happening in Morocco to his friends who are journalists. Some of them are in jail. And he was the way, the amount of depth, the amount of work he did here was unparalleled for me. And I had not seen anybody else like analyzing social media in that way and just talking about its profound impacts and how worried he is and stuff like that. And so I realized, if I can't have people like that, then we will miss a lot of the important issues that we should be working on. So those were the kinds of things I was thinking about when I thought distributed. And also, if we have to displace people, dislodge people from their communities for them to work at DARE, whether it is moving from one city in the U.S. to another, or from the African continent to the U.S., which contributes to the brain drain. That I didn't think that was the kind of thing that I wanted to contribute to. So those are the ways in which that's why I thought of the word distributed, which decentralized is also similar. And same question about blockchain companies. Honestly, to be honest with you, Ari, I don't understand blockchain. Like, people have tried to explain it to me. I understand something decentralized, something crypto. I do not understand blockchain, and I'm sure somebody else needs to sit down and explain it to me again. And so maybe then, so currently, no, we're not seeking partnerships because I don't even understand it. Yeah. Should I just go down these Q&As, or how do you want to do this, Mia?
Yeah, we don't have much time because we have to set up our next one, because we have a ton of questions. There was a great one about what is your take on organizations like PAI that are doing interesting work, but also closely linked to big tech. So if you want to close out on that'd be great. And then we'll just switch. And folks, if you're not following Dr. Timnit Gebru already, please get on Twitter, follow them, follow the works, and support them, support her work. But we'll just take that one last question and then close this out.
I had many reservations about partnership on AI when it was formed, seeing who it was formed by and how it was used. So, for instance, every time we criticize Jan LeCun, he'll be like, "Oh, I care about AI ethics. I co-founded partnership on AI." I'm like, well, that is exactly the problem. You're the person who, And so I never had high hopes for that organization. But I mean, there were a lot of people working there that I really kind of, I like, that I admired, and they were trying to make something out of it. But I don't really, I'm not, I think that if PAI was able to hold corporations accountable somehow, like if they, you know what I mean? If they could somehow do something, I think that would be good. But the way I see it right now is that there are people from civil society, there's people from companies, but the civil society people are basically like there for them to be able to say, hey, no, it's not all just tech companies, it's civil society too. So I haven't really seen anything, that I can point to yet, but I hear that they have a lot of money, but also from tech companies. So I like the people working on it, and I don't know many of them now, but I used to. There's also a huge turnaround, I feel, and so but the organization itself, I don't, I can say a lot more, but I'm just not hopeful for it.